left hand technique. That is our very important topic for this video, since we talked quite a lot about different alternate picking exercises in the last couple of weeks. A good and reliable left hand technique is equally important for playing challenging stuff like that, for example. So for today's video, I'd like to show you the exercise and concept that helped me most with developing my left hand technique further this year. Finally really getting control of my pinky finger so that it's not flying around uncontrolled like that anymore. Correcting other technique mistakes with my left hand and playing fast and clean legato phrases. Those were pretty much my personal most important practice goals for this year. So I'm really excited to show you this very cool exercise today. Let's not waste any more time and start shredding right away. So last year, when I decided that I need to work much more on my left hand and legato technique, my playing looked something like that. So a really big motion, you can hear a lot of dirt coming from the strings, especially when you're playing with distortion. And I also made the mistake of just focusing on the hammer-ons in the beginning and not really including any pull-offs. I was kind of emulating the 3-note per string phrases that I practiced when it comes to my picking technique. As you probably know by now, these are some workouts that I like to do to synchronize my picking strokes with the notes that my left hand is playing. In case you missed those workouts, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now, because I'm uploading weekly material. That way you won't miss any new exercises that I'm posting or music theory concepts that might really help you with unlocking your fretboard or your guitar playing in general. So by subscribing, you become an important part of this channel today that is absolutely dedicated to guitar progress and becoming a better and better player every single week. That's what this is basically all about. So when I started working on pull-offs, I noticed that they were much harder for me than the hammer-ons, because with the technique that I had back then, I was constantly just making the strings ring like that, because I didn't really develop that snapping motion and I was constantly turning my wrist like that. So before we check out the most important details concerning the wrist angle and the motion in general and the technique, let's take a look at the exercise that I want you to practice starting today. As always, you can download the PDF tabs, guitar profiles and special video play-alongs I recorded for you on patreon.com/Bernd. With those really cool video play-along files that I'm uploading for pretty much every single lesson that concerns exercises like that on Patreon, you can practice together with me in your next practice routine, so you always have a great reference of the technique and exercise. And I also added some scrolling tablature so you can read out the exercise while you're practicing with me. Of course, I'm also recording them in different tempos, so we're starting really slow so that you're getting a feeling for the exercise, and then we're moving to the next levels. So here's why this workout is so effective and so important for your practice routine. First of all, we're keeping things simple. We don't immediately work with all 6 strings, or 7 or 8, depending on the instrument that you like to play. We're just working with the 2 lowest strings in the beginning, and as you might have guessed already, I also want you to move that to all the other string pairs. So once you practice this for a couple of weeks on the E and A string, you can move to the D and G string and to the B and E string. But I think it's a great idea to stick to the E and A string in the beginning, since you will be quite comfortable with playing on these, especially if you're coming from riffs and rock and metal music in general. The second really important detail that makes this exercise so effective is that we're working with every single finger. When you're working with scales, heptatonic scales like the minor or major scale or the modes, or with the pentatonic scale, you usually work with 3 notes per string or with 2 notes per string. So that means that you're not really using all of your fingers for the entire workout. That's why it is really effective to work with the chromatic scale in the beginning. Of course, that's less musical. You can't really use that exercise in a song or anything like that. It's just a technique exercise. But you're working with every single finger, and as you will see, it's much harder to get control of your pinky finger, to get some really strong and well-articulated notes out of that one than it is for your index and middle finger that might have more experience with hammer-ons and pull-offs already. Before you start practicing this with the video play-alongs and files are uploaded for you on Patreon, let's talk a bit more about the technique. So first of all, what's really important for me is keeping the motion really small. As I said in the beginning, one of my biggest beginner mistakes was thinking I need a massive amount of force to actually make the notes ring, that I really need to hammer on the fretboard like that, when in fact that doesn't really get you great results with that. The notes kind of tend to somehow overlap. You can't really identify the individual notes anymore. Of course, there's a lot of dirt coming from the strings since you're constantly touching all the other strings. So the motion is actually really relaxed and quite small. You don't really need that much attack when it comes to the motion. It will sound much more fluid if the motion is small and relaxed, and it will be also easier to stay in time that way, to really feel the notes that you are playing, and it will also sound really clean also when you're playing with a clean sound or on acoustic guitar, for example. And if you want to play fast, of course, this is also really beneficial because it's much easier to speed up a small relaxed motion like that than to speed up a really hectic and kind of exhausting big motion like that. The next important detail or mistake that I made in the beginning is really kind of performing a wrist motion like that, similar to vibrato or to bending, where your wrist is kind of moving like that. That's actually not beneficial when it comes to legato playing, in my opinion. I got much better in control results when I stopped moving my wrist that way. So as you can see, I'm not really moving my hand that way. It pretty much stays locked in this position, and that really helps with getting control out of the motion and also with keeping a good left hand technique angle, because it's really difficult to stretch, as we often discussed already. When your left hand technique looks something like that, I can't really reach anywhere beyond a minor third with my pinky finger like that, and it gets much easier as soon as you're using a technique like that. And usually I also like to place my thumb around the area behind my middle finger for that. But with this exercise, it has to wander a little bit because we are moving this pattern up the fretboard up until the 12th fret or the 15th fret actually with our pinky finger. So it can feel a bit strange to place your thumb behind your middle finger when you're playing all the way up here. So it kind of wanders a bit to the back right here, but it's never really sticking out like that, as you have probably observed, because that kind of makes it impossible to spread out your fingers and to get that kind of grip and support that is needed for those hammer-ons and pull-offs. By the way, my absolute favorite legato player is Tom Quayle, a fellow Ibanez endorser, and you should really check out his channel as well, in case you want to get more into legato, especially if you're into fusion. And another thing that's really important with this exercise is playing in time, of course, and spacing the notes correctly, but also focusing on the articulation of every single note, because what you don't want is a super aggressive picking stroke at the beginning of the phrase, then relatively soft hammer-ons. So you really want that to be as connected as possible so that the listener won't even really hear the difference between the hammer-ons and pull-offs and the picked notes. That gives it this really cool fluid sound. So as you can see, I don't really have super aggressive picking strokes right here. I try to merge all the notes together, and I'm also using my middle finger for the next string to make it more connected. Of course, you can also just work with regular picking when it comes to that. Just make sure not to have a super aggressive accent on every first note or every single note that falls on the beat. Try to articulate them at the same kind of volume, playing with the same kind of dynamics to get this cool connected and fluid sound. And working on your left hand technique like this also pays off with pretty much everything that you're doing on guitar. So this is not just a legato exercise in my opinion. It also really helps with nailing those sweep picking patterns without getting that flying pinky finger constantly that I had a couple of years ago. And of course it also helps with tapping quite a lot, since you're essentially just performing legato licks with one more extra note with your right hand. So working on your left hand technique really pays off in the end when it comes to all sorts of different techniques and styles of music, of course. Of course, it's really important to work on your picking as well, but if your left hand can't really keep up with what your right hand is doing, you will run into some problems. So if you would like to finally improve your left hand technique and get your legato game to the next level, make sure to head over to patreon.com/Bernd to download your PDF tabs, guitar profiles and video play alongs for this lesson. You can also download these files for over 120 lessons over there already. And in case you would like some personal feedback on your technique, music, compositions or anything else, you can also join our VIP club in the form of our secret Facebook group. So in the end, thanks a lot for tuning in and for watching this video until the end. That really means a lot to me. Leave a like in case you enjoyed it, and also don't forget to subscribe if you aren't part of this guitar community already. I will hopefully see you again in the next video. All the best and have a lot of fun practicing until then.